the concept and the organization of what is known as a family office, they've intrigued me for such a long time and are the expertise of my guest today. You guys are going to love episode 13. Now, one of my personal beliefs in life that I've accumulated through seeing others' experiences and my own, analyzing my own experiences, is that anything, literally anything, is possible. Whether you want more money, more time, more happiness, a companion, do you want kids, a successful business, a successful career, whatever the case may be, that is possible. Now, along with that belief, because that's just part of the story, along with that belief is this notion that there was already somebody else out there that had what is wanted, whether it's me or you. And instead of going about experimenting, trial and error and so forth, which is, I believe is the hard way, the shortcut, right, is to figure out what that person does or what they did to get those results. Now that this led to a value at my company Paradigm. We have a set of values that we make decisions through, and one of them is be, do, have. And the concept of be, do, have may be familiar to a lot of you, but maybe unfamiliar, foreign to some of you. The idea is that in order to have something, you have to have the behavior before that produces those results. But in order to have that behavior, mindset is what influences behavior. Now, the behavior that you have right now is producing the results that you have. If you want different results, you have to have different behavior. And in order to have a different behavior, you have to have that different paradigm or perspective. So it's figuring out the person that has those results and what are their actions and what is their mentality, their perspective, their paradigm. So my guest today is basically someone that is, I would consider, an expert in regards to family offices, and he runs the Family Office Club. His name is Richard Wilson, and you can check him out on his own podcast, but visit his website. It's familyoffice.com and capitalraising.com as well. He has a couple of ebooks on there that you can download for free. Now, Richard specializes in helping ultra high net worth families create the concept of a family office. So the family office is a structure for these high net worth families to manage their family and also their wealth. So instead of having scattered legal, insurance, investment, estate planning, business consulting, people that are just in different organizations, it is all done under the exact same roof. And this is what's called a family office. And I believe that the management here really shows you how ultra high net worth families are able to pass on their wealth from generation to generation to generation. And it's not just estate planning, because estate planning is just facilitating the transfer of assets if you just boil it down. But the idea is that wealth was created. Again, going back to the be, do, have principle. Okay, wealth is a result of something. There was something that was done. There was a mentality that influenced that behavior that typically the next generation doesn't have, unless you have a very cohesive plan in order to teach them the principles behind how that wealth was created. And so that's a part of it as well. And so it's a fascinating conversation. This guy's an expert. He helps with a lot of the investment side of things. He consults with these families to help set up the structure. And so I think you guys are going to find the interview pretty fascinating. So check out the new website. All the links that will be discussed on the podcast, on the interview today, are there in our show notes, and also we'll have the resources mentioned as well on there. And then finally, if you guys wouldn't mind, if you love what you hear, definitely go into iTunes and give us a positive review. And then recently also I have been a little bit more active on Instagram and Facebook. So if you want to follow me on those channels, feel free to do so. The links will be in the show notes to do so. All right, everyone. Can't wait for you to hear this next podcast episode. It's episode 13 of season 1 of the Wealth Standard podcast. Richard Wilson.
Welcome to the special 2018 seasons of the Wealth Standard podcast, celebrating life, liberty, and property. You are currently listening to Life Season 1.
Okay, so Richard, welcome to the show. It's great to have you here.
Thanks, Rich. Thanks for having me, Patrick. I'm happy to be here, and I think that it'll be exciting to talk about, what we've planned to about Simple Millionaires.
Well, this is the thing. It's I would say, the area in which that you operate is an area that most people have no idea exists. And so I think it's going to be a very intriguing conversation, kind of getting into, what are some of the more, affluent families in the world doing? How are they structured? How are they operating their businesses? How are they working on legacy? I don't know. It's going to be a fascinating conversation, but I thought it might be good for you just to give, kind of a brief summary of how you got into this space where you're working with that type of crowd.
Sure. Essentially, I was raising capital in Boston, and I found that while trying to raise capital from what were called family offices, which are organizations that manage the wealth for those that are worth 10 million, 50 million, or hundreds of millions of dollars, that nobody was helpful to me. So just out of self-interest, I was just writing about what I was learning in the industry. And then almost on accident, the website took off and started getting thousands of hits. And I got on the front page of the Boston Globe and spoke 150 times in 17 different countries. And that experience in meeting with well over 1,000 family offices in person, it all just kind of created a business naturally, just by listening to what the people are asking me about and seeing the evolution of the space. So I was in the right place at the right time, was part of it. And then I just doubled down and tripled down once I saw that this was going to be a big industry over time. I got into it really.
So how long ago was that?
11 years ago. That's when I started.
Okay. So maybe let's just kind of dive right into, some of the things that you have learned from, from these structures. Maybe first by just explaining what a family office is, but then maybe getting into, what are some of those elements of the structure that make contrast with, the typical way of doing things, the traditional way of doing things.
Sure. So traditionally, somebody might have their wealth managed by a broker or a financial advisor, and then they separately have an insurance agent. They separately might donate some money to a couple charities. They separately might have a lawyer they work with every now and then to form an LLC or something. And they typically don't have a lot of complicated trust and estate and tax planning. But when you're worth more, there's many things that happen. One is your life gets more complex. And you're typically responsible for managing all that complexity. And still your advisors expect you to be the one coordinating between everyone. So your CPA might tell you something, and you have to remember that, and maybe tell your wealth advisor, and then your wealth advisor might not be talking to your insurance agent, et cetera. So it's very fragmented. And at the same time, you have more going on in your personal life because you're more successful. You have more employees, more people asking you for money, et cetera. More likely to be a target of the IRS or other things, other organizations. And because of that, there is less time on your plate to be looking at things. And the cost of making a mistake is much greater. So if you make a 1% mistake on your taxes and you're worth $100 million, you just lost $1 million that could have paid for a full-time team. It's much different than if you're worth $100,000. Then you probably made many mistakes and you don't care that much, or you might not even know you ever made the mistake. So the problem gets worse, and it's more likely to be a problem the more wealthy you are. So a family office is putting protections in place, making it holistic, making sure all the trains are leaving the station in a coordinated effort. And it's not only protecting you, which usually pays for the family office cost itself, but then you can be more proactive and say, okay, I made my money by being a professional hockey player. So I want to invest in the hockey industry, and we're going to be using my connections to professional teams or the media channels we have in that industry, et cetera. And we're going to be applying that expertise and using our DNA to invest more intelligently. So that gets into more of like what I see happening within my clients. But that's why family offices exist, is to play defense, coordinate, and then gather yourself on what would be a proactive offense for your investments.
Now, I know one of the examples that's used often, and by the way, that was a great explanation. That was probably the best explanation I've ever received of what a family office is. But what I would say is, the examples that I've at least heard is really the Rockefeller family and the Vanderbilt family. And, the Rockefeller family is one that I've heard kind of pioneered the idea of a family office and how things are orchestrated, whether it's the financial and business team, all kind of working in sync. But it's also from a legacy standpoint, which is, as you do have heirs to the throne, right? You're able to incorporate the values, the principles that created the wealth in the first place. So could you maybe talk to those two families, the Vanderbilts and the Rockefellers, and kind of where they fit into this whole family office idea, and then maybe talk about how family offices have evolved from there?
Sure. I mean, I think that they're very famous families, so they're good examples of it. But, when you go all the way back to the days of, castles in medieval times, I mean, essentially those were ultra wealthy families who put up walls to keep out people trying to take their wealth or take their resources. And they would also invest in proactively expanding and sending out exploration ships. And, at the heart of it all is that
comes to mind,
what's fallen apart is that as the mass affluent crowd grows, and then there's a gap between those who are worth many billions of dollars. Right, for sure. I mean, I think that it goes back, pieces of having a family office in place, the idea is very simple. And so it goes back, you can go back 1,000 years if you want to on it. But what's really evolved more recently is people hearing this word family office and thinking to themselves, well, why isn't my wealth being managed holistically? Maybe I am only worth $7 million or $14 million, but why should I, with my 30 employees, have to keep track of all these different things? I want somebody centrally doing it, and somebody who can be, doing a more holistic job and be more high service than the normal wealth manager. But the other thing that really drives the family office concept forward, I think more than anything else, is the fact that at the core of it all, the demand is for direct investments that multifamily offices typically can't help with at all. If you say you want to buy an apartment building, they say, no, invest in this REIT. And that way it's more liquid and you can diversify your access, et cetera. And only 1% of wealth management firms and multifamily offices will be helpful at all. Otherwise, it'd be like, oh yeah, well, I heard there's this broker downtown. Maybe he can help you. Or, they're not going to be able to help you in a hands-on way almost at all. At best, it'll be a private, quote unquote, deal that's syndicated among 300 clients within UBS, and you're going to own 0.5% of an asset that you'll have no control in, and there'll be 5 layers of fees and 2 that you're only aware of. So with a family that's made their own wealth in its first generation, which is 90% of my clients, their whole life has been them navigating the jungle and cutting down fruits themselves. So it's totally backwards for them to get to age 45 at a liquidity event or at some point in their life and say, okay, well, I spent my whole life building this wealth here. Now you manage it all for me and try not to lose it and charge me fees along the way. So for them, it's just unnatural. They want control. They want to be investing in the industry they know, typically 20, 40% in real estate of some type or a hard asset of some type. They might want to do lending. And a lot of wealth management firms are just old school, like, oh, stocks, bonds, ETFs, indexes, let's get you beta access, let's put you in these fund managers. And that's appropriate for most people for part of their portfolio. But the self-made guy who's an entrepreneur his whole life, it's totally backwards to be like, okay, here you go. No,
it's totally conflicting, right?
So that's the core of it. Yeah.
So maybe how
sure.
have you maybe seen kind of like the evolution, or how they're looking forward to the future, like where they've evolved from, what they're looking at for the future, who are they following, like what do you see that these family offices are doing? I mean, obviously you've hit on the one thing, which is staying kind of true to a niche, right? Whether it's the film industry or a professional sport, et cetera. But what are you seeing as kind of like the evolution of family offices and what they're doing looking into the future?
Sure. There's 2 new trends that are becoming popular, but still probably are not used by hardly anyone at all, but it's inevitable that they'll grow. One is doing more marketing and branding and public relations as a single family office. People might say, oh no, well, we're private. We would never do marketing. But then you don't have anything sweating for you in the marketplace originating deal flow. So you might say, oh, well, I don't want to have the Wilson family office because people are going to hunt me down and find out who Richard Wilson is and find me and ask me for money for silly things. But instead of having it be the Wilson family office, if you made your money working in hospitality, you could create the hospitality family office or at the whatever holding company related to hospitality with a hospitality logo, or you can communicate to the hospitality industry if that's the deal flow you want, because you have strategic connections, distribution channels, sales abilities, you're a titan of the space, you're locally known, you have credibility. Then you could be going to hospitality conferences, events, magazines, being interviewed by people, and be displaying and wearing on the sleeve the hospitality holding company, and just be getting hospitality deal flow if that's where you think your direct investment should be going. And there is no privacy downfall, because you can have the privacy on the who is details on your domain name, and you can have things shielded and have your professional staff members on the team and have it be shielding your privacy while being very public, because then you'll get superior deal flow, and you'll get deal flow that you'll see first before it goes to a broker, before it goes to a family that's not specialized, because you can add strategic value. You'll see deal flow you'll get a better valuation of, because they know that you can take them places they want to go faster. And otherwise, maybe they don't need money because they have a very profitable, successful business. You might be added to a board. You might be able to invest and get a small equity piece in a company that, again, doesn't need investors. But if you can be on that board, it could be an opportunity. And it's not only the deals you might see first or might see only exclusively, but when you combine that with the valuation perspective and the ability to have synergy on closed deals, everything builds momentum. So each new investment you do, there might be more cross-selling, upselling, one business's lead generation for another business. And now you have a chessboard all in the hospitality space, and you can destroy competition because your acquisition cost of the customer could be higher and you still make more money than the other person perhaps, or you have a longer view. So your time horizon is longer and they're trying to flip a company in 7 years and you're not, you know?
That's interesting. And I would say, so from like a securities standpoint, I mean, that is, essentially syndicating and using kind of outside family money. Like I know there's registrations available, to family offices so that they're, doing that above board. Right. So so is it so to participate in those type of deals, right? So if there's a hospitality family office, are they looking just for other family offices to invest with them? Is that kind of how it's working?
A lot of my clients just, they have money to allocate and they don't need to raise any capital. So they're just looking for the best deal flow to allocate their capital to.
So it could be individual clients.
It is. Yeah. So
okay.
I've got a client that's sold his business for $350 million. And, he's just looking to allocate. He doesn't need anyone's money. He just needs the best deal flow possible. You have many multifamily offices that speak at our conferences. Like we had 53 family offices on stage at our family office club event in December. And half of them were multifamily offices who are registered RIAs and who, are managing wealth for clients. They typically don't do direct investments though, like hospitality. But we do have a lot of independent sponsors who come and they form like a special purpose vehicle or a fund. And it might be just a one deal fund. So it keeps it away from being a blind pool situation. But then they syndicate the deal after putting 10 or 20% of their money in. But, there are family offices that also raise capital. But a lot of single family offices are just looking to allocate their capital in the smartest way possible. And if every now and then they co-invest with another family, they may do so. But a lot of them are just trying to allocate and, strategically use their capital in the best way possible.
That's interesting. Well, it's a fascinating space. I imagine you're learning quite a bit from it, but maybe speak to that. And then maybe as we end, we can talk about, what kind of the traditional, family offices are doing to pass on legacy to those family members that are born into the family.
Sure. Yeah. So, one thing I commonly see is just the long-term platform approach to a business niche. Most of the time, I'd say 80-90% of the time, it's where the family made their money. And then they also have an allocation to real estate, but both things need to have intentionality behind it. So typically it's a lot smarter to have a strategy, a go-to strategy where you're going to be building strategic expertise for your real estate allocations. And that might matter more than choosing the lucky time to invest or the right asset class to invest. And for all families, different levels of diversification are appropriate. You can never give like a generic blanket advice for such a thing, but at least having the strategy for when you're allocating. So that's something that a lot of mass affluent and people that are worth under 30 million, under 50 million, I just had dinner last night with someone who's worth over 50 million, and they don't have a go-to strategy for this. So something that's missing from a lot of people that don't have a formalized family office. But also on the business side, on the operating business side, I just see that the family offices consistently look to where things are going, look for where things inevitably will be higher value than they are now. And then they just go for the long-term lockdown on that, whether they're dominating a niche or they're just covering an area to have maximum distribution over the long term. They, because there's not many other organizations out there like a private equity fund. They got to turn things over in 7 or 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
Pension fund or endowment fund, they're not navigating agile deals. And the high net worth guy doesn't have enough money to take down the big deals. Mm-hmm. So they're able to think for the long term, but write checks both small and large that just focus on that niche. Where the private equity funds, they have to cherry pick the big deals that, meet their criteria, and they have a different time horizon. So I think the takeaways for anyone listening is that if you look at a niche area that's going to grow in value, if you can take the longer term approach so that you have high conviction over that long term, but you're patient in how you do it and you're tactical, and you look at how different businesses can help each other in your portfolio, then you can do perhaps better than someone that just says yes to the exciting cannabis investment and, oh yeah, this crypto fund is going to be amazing and triple my money, but I don't understand anything about how it works. And there's a lot of like shiny bright objects when someone knows you have money. Yeah, for sure. So a lot of people who, like you were describing, who some of your listeners are, I think a lot of them fall prey to the friend who has the crypto fund or the friend that has that exciting thing. And if you don't know what you're investing in, then typically, unless you have someone very much that you trust advising you, just don't invest in it,
Well, in the end, it's one of those, I don't know, the human behavior is very, very interesting. And I think, this may play into the last piece, because psychology, right? It doesn't matter really how educated you are. At some point, like you're prey to emotions, right? You're a prey to, that
right.
greed of the shiny object, right? And I think, that's indicative of what's going on right now in the crypto space. And I think the tell is the fact that, very few people can explain what it is, right? And they're obviously investing in it because of the upside, right? And in the end, I mean, I would say, whether it's the high net worth crowd or whether it's, just the normal retail investor, that kind of human behavior element is fascinating. That's why I think, financial education is one of those things that it's coming to me over and over as you've been talking, because, these are families that, it's like a Marriott family. Like, why would a Marriott family, right, start a family office and then go invest in like oil and gas, right? They're in hospitality. They're in that suite. They understand that, right? That's all that they're going to do. There may be upside potential somewhere else, but like the risk associated with that all prays to human, it's human behavior. But because of that experience, because of knowledge, because of network, et cetera, like, it doesn't make any sense for them to do something different. But I would say it comes down to not just the experience, but also the financial education of the family itself.
Right. For sure. One of my coaches is Dan Sullivan, and he always says, when you simplify, things multiply. Mm-hmm. And I think that is true for hands-on direct investing. It's very different than trying to diversify in the public markets and using a professional for that part of your portfolio. Because when you diversify with direct investments, you lose the synergies, the learning curves don't, coincide with each other. The team can't be as multifunctional. The infrastructure can't be used in the same ways. So you have to be really careful diversifying too much with direct investments, I think.
So maybe let's finish with this. So this is a few years ago, but we've done some work with Agora before. I'm sure you're familiar with Agora, but Bill Bonner, his son, kind of created this course on a family office, and it was very intriguing. And there was a side of it that dealt with investment, which we've been covering, but there's another side of it that dealt really with how family passes on values, because I would say the individual that created the wealth in the first place, right, probably thinks different than the status quo, but it doesn't mean that their genealogy or their progeny is going to be the same thing. They're not going to have the same experiences. They're going to be born, within this framework that, they're really not going to have to do anything. So if you think about it, So what are some tactics or things that family offices are doing to, to educate their kids, their grandkids, and maybe those that will come, after they're gone?
Sure. Well, I think one mistake a lot of families make, in my opinion, is they say, oh, well, let's get the kids involved early and we'll have them help with the foundation and giving away money to kids in Africa. And deep in their brain, they're embedding in the kid's mind that, hey, money's everywhere, flows out of our nose. Let's give it away as fast as possible. And they're training the kid to give away money. But the family's wealth was created by creating value through the world, which is doing good by running a business, hiring people, spending money, improving the economy, et cetera. For sure, it should involve also things that are good and treating employees well. And there could be a philanthropic part, but it should be in its own place and not the full focus of kids as they grow up into teenagers in college, unless they want to work at a nonprofit their whole life, which they might, but they're less likely to have their own independent career that is fulfilling with that mindset. It's a mindset of unlimited resources and let's give it all away. And unless that's the family's goal, it's probably not a good thing to be doing exclusively with kids, but I see it a lot and they think, yeah, this is great. The other thing is that I think it's, wise for families to create a family bank and basically give kids money for education, maybe even master's or PhD degree education, maybe a first home at age whatever, 28 or 30, or a first home once you get that education done. But beyond that, I think it's pretty smart for families to say, well, we also have $100 million over here in this trust. And if you want access to that money, you have to come up with a business plan. That business plan gets reviewed by the elders. You then get feedback. It then gets revised a few times over, and it's limited to X amount of dollars your first time. And then if that gets approved, we will fund the business, and the money goes right into the business that we're funding that'll perpetuate the family legacy of entrepreneurship. Otherwise, you're not going to get a new Ferrari every 2 years and condos in Miami Beach and Monaco and Ibiza. Like, you're going to work and you're going to we're going to force you to have a fulfilling life to actually do something besides play video games and experiment with substances, So I think that's exactly what I would do. If I can get my business to the level where I have that high quality problem of having to plan that, is creating a family bank to encourage, resourcewulness and, productivity.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, all of this is pretty fascinating, because I think if you look at the comment that you made regarding, philanthropic efforts, right, and actual productive value creating businesses, it's one of those things where I don't think society really understands like the difference, because they would assume that the better thing to do, right, is like the philanthropic stuff, but that is the least. Right. That is, I would say, in a sense, like a waste of resources. Okay, because in the end, if they've built that, it means that they've created a tremendous amount of value, and they could continue to do that. And I think that continual drive to produce more, to do more, right? I wouldn't say they're necessarily doing it because of the financial side alone, but it's because of their expertise, and they're making improvements which ultimately benefit way more than whatever the philanthropic effort is going to be. Now, not to say that the philanthropic effort is bad. But what I'm saying is that the focus is production. And I think really talking about that with children, that is, again, it's like their minds are plastic growing up, right? And they don't necessarily look at themselves as being able to take who they are, their characteristics, their experience, and be valuable to other people because of what they produce, not what they like give away that they didn't produce. Anyway, it's a fascinating, just the psychology on it, but from the family bank perspective. So that's what I have I'm not at the level, I'm not at that level of family office or wealth, but right. Even like from a younger level, like I have 3 kids, and my 13-year-old and 11-year-old, we have our own family bank. Now it's not this idea, because I know that, traditional family offices have a, literal like fund entity, et cetera, in terms, and all the documents are drawn up, there's titles and you have all of that. But just from like a theoretical standpoint, I think that has been the best tool that I've had with my kids, because you don't have to say no to things. Okay. But you lend to them, and then they have to pay it back, right? They have to actually go out and figure out ways in which they create value. and they babysit in our neighborhood, but they've figured out ways to actually enhance the babysitting experience, right? Where they want more money, they want to be able to pay back loans because they want to buy things. Okay, but they're out, now I'm not saying, just the consumption way is the best way to do it. But what I'm saying is like what they're learning about interest, what they're learning about, going out and actually having to work and do things, right? And try to be valuable. That's where the money's gonna come from. So even I would say, from a family office perspective, that's kind of where I got the original idea. But in the end, it's like it provides like a built-in accountability.
Right, for sure. And it just gets it deep in their brain that like you create value for others. And then that is how you get things in life, is by producing something, and like knowing that when you mess up, maybe you don't get paid at all, or maybe you get paid less, or maybe it's not sustainable pay. Like those are all important lessons that they don't teach you in school, and that are so important to, just surviving as a person in society, that just gets missed with people going in $80K in debt for a history degree, but they don't want to teach, like there's just like in so many ways it comes out in career choices, education choices, and just, life choices, I think. So for sure, I think it's really important. I think that a lot of family offices struggle with how to do it because they grow up and the kids go into a $40,000 a year kindergarten, and they have got a private plane, and they have 6 houses, and yet they want the kid to still be as resourceful and hardworking as they were, but maybe they grew up and they didn't have enough money in college to buy a girl a cup of coffee. It's hard to replicate that for the next generation, I think.
Yeah, and there's probably so many examples of that, but in the end, you do have dynasty families that are out there. They're continuing to, just reinforce their principles, their values into the future generations, so that they are hopefully more productive than the original founders. Well, this has been awesome, Richard. I mean, you obviously are kind of getting a front row seat to like $1 trillion education. It's been awesome to have you on and kind of share your wisdom. I'll give you the final word on, what piece of advice you'd give to our audience, but also talk about how people can get a hold of you, which of course we'll post on show notes and social media and online.
Sure. For those that are looking to work with family offices in some way, I imagine there's some listeners who would like to do that. I just really encourage them to think about it as growing a relationship first, instead of worrying about showing a deal to a family. There might be people listening who are like, oh, maybe I could raise capital for this real estate deal or for my private equity fund. But I think it's really important that you lay the tracks down first, because no one invests in a deal unless they know and are, they find the person behind the deal credible. That gets missed a lot in this space, and I hear it a lot at our events. And if anyone wants to learn more, we have 2 different books for free on familyoffices.com. We have a book on family offices for free, and on capitalraising.com, we have a free book on raising capital. And you get the whole books for free. So there's no, real catch there. You can buy them on Amazon, and they're super cheap as they'll allow me to sell them, but might as well get them for free on the website. And then, if anyone has questions or wants to follow up or see, when our capital raising workshops are, or family office events, they can just email me at richard@familyoffices.com.
Cool. And we'll get, all the links to the sites and social media as well. So if you weren't able to take that information down, then we'll just go to the website and or go to just our social media. We posted on there as well. Richard, awesome. It was awesome, man. Thank you so much for sharing with us today. It's been really valuable for me personally, but also I guarantee for our listeners.
Yeah, I'd love to keep in touch, Patrick. Maybe we could have you on our family office podcast as well sometime, or have you at one of our events.
Hey, I'd love to. Anytime.
Great.
Thanks, Richard.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us as the Wealth Standard Podcast spends all of 2018 celebrating life, liberty, and property. Be sure to leave us a review on iTunes, and we'll see you on the next one.